I want to thank everybody for coming today and joining us this morning as we talk about a very, very, very important topic, and that's food safety. Now, Phil talked a little bit about what happens when we get food safety right, how it can help our business, how it can help our image, and ultimately how it can do really, really great things for our brand. But this morning, I want to talk about what happens when we get it wrong. What happens when we don't do food safety right, and how it can impact our business and our brand. Now, I'm with Food Industry Counsel, the founder of the only law firm in the world that represents only the food industry. And how can we get away with just representing growers and processors and distributors and restaurant chains and national grocery chains? Because you guys are keeping us very, very, very busy. Last year alone, there were 500 recalls of USDA and FDA-regulated products. 500 recalls. Thousands of people got very sick, and hundreds died as a result of the food they consumed, and those are only the confirmed cases. 10 times that amount unconfirmed. So in the food industry, we're really operating in a business, in an industry where we're surrounded by tremendous, tremendous risk. And when things go wrong, the consequences can be very catastrophic. Now, our mantra is probably helping the hard-working people, like each and every single one of you, who feed our families. And we do that in a lot of different ways. Through crisis management, working with companies as they're facing recalls, helping with regulatory compliance, defending foodborne illness claims when a product makes somebody very sick or even kills them. But the most enjoyable part of what we do is this: advocacy. Talking about the different things that companies have done right so that they can be repeated, and maybe giving some insight into some of the things that companies have done wrong that have led to catastrophe, so that those things are not repeated. And talking about and highlighting and lifting up and bringing to your attention the incredible resources that exist, like Safe Food Matters, to help us every day in our business make sure that we're producing the safest food possible. And remember this: by associating ourselves with this industry, the food industry, we have taken on an incredible responsibility, an awesome responsibility. And what is that? We are responsible for the health of a nation. Each and every one of us. And that is something we cannot nor should ever forget. So putting our customers first, why safe food really matters? Well, it matters, of course, because our stores, our company, our employees, our brand, right, all depend on safe food. But it also matters from a personal standpoint, from a human standpoint, right? Because we are, every day, responsible for putting food on the plates of our own families, our neighbors, our friends, our community, our customers. And again, that's a very, very, very important task. And why do we care about food safety when we talk about it from a human standpoint? Well, it's because the risks are real. Food can be very, very scary. Oftentimes, we don't know where our food is coming from. We don't really know the supplier who's sending it to us. If we're a processor, do we really know who's shipping us ingredients that are going into that final product? What if we're sourcing a lot of our food from overseas, beyond where any of us can see or perhaps never even visited? Food can be very scary, and as a result, as we know, we just need to turn on the TV and watch the news. Food can also be very, very dangerous. And there's a reason for that. The primary reason is because risk is everywhere when it comes to food. And we need to understand that. We need to internalize that. I think too often in this industry, we think about food safety risk as perhaps maybe some of us would think about something like, say, cancer. We all know of somebody who has been afflicted. Some of us have ourselves, but not everyone. And we think, well, that probably or hopefully will only happen to somebody else. Never to me. Until it does strike. And then it becomes real. Then it becomes human. It steps out of the theoretical. And it's the same with respect to food safety. We are surrounded by risk to the extent we are handling, preparing, and selling food products. A picture of a pig, and a cow, and maybe a turkey. Most of the foods that we're preparing and selling come from where? The farm environment, raw animal products. And the processors might be doing a very good job preparing those foods, but what about post-lethality contamination? It happens a lot more frequently than you may think. What about the other types of products that find their ways into our delis? They come from where? The dirt. And dirt is dirty, right? And that's what we're shipping. That's what we're bringing into our stores. And turning those products into the various things that we put out on display for our customers. And once that stuff comes into our store, and if they're carrying contaminants, those contaminants can very easily spread. So what does it mean to understand that risk is everywhere? This concept of understanding, again, it's taking it out of the theoretical and putting it into the reality, into the here, the now, and understanding that it could very well happen to each one of us. Now, how many people have seen the television show The Deadliest Catch, right? Just about everybody. It's a show on TV about, Discovery Channel, about what? A bunch of hard-working Americans, people who are trying to put food on our tables. And they call it the deadliest catch for a reason, because there's a lot of risk associated with that profession. Every season, those sailors steam out to sea, and they're faced with this, what? Theoretical risk, because every season that they go back out, the ship hasn't sunk yet. Yeah, it may have happened to somebody else. They know somebody who had an issue, but it hasn't happened to them. That's why the season can continue. It's theoretical. And that risk takes a lot of different forms. It could be a storm forming on over the horizon, gale force winds, sleet, hail, ice in the water that could breach the hull of the ship. Somebody falls overboard, the engine fails, or a rogue wave comes out of nowhere and sinks the boat. And in the food business, it's the same. Every day when we go into our processing facilities or our grocery stores and we turn on the lights and we start preparing food, we're surrounded by risk as well. And in our case, our rogue wave that can come out of nowhere and strike without warning comes in the form of foodborne pathogens. So what we're really trying to do is not avoid the deadliest catch, but avoiding the deadliest batch. And that's how we need to think about food safety. Every moment and every day. And we cannot become complacent. Now, we've seen countless examples where our assumptions have sort of been challenged. It used to be we think about lettuce and spinach, very healthy. It's good for us, right? Eat as much as you can. No one ever would have dreamed that value-added, prepackaged salads sold on grocery store shelves could make people very sick or kill them. Why? Because those types of products are grown in the environment. They're grown in dirt. Dirt is dirty. And animals do what animals do, moving from one field to the next. Birds flying from one area to another, spreading contamination as they go. We're all probably familiar with the cantaloupe issue from 2011, where cantaloupe contaminated with Listeria killed dozens of people and made hundreds very, very sick. The owners of the company were criminally charged by FDA. And they didn't try to hurt anybody. They didn't intend to hurt anybody. They just weren't doing a good enough job. And those are the types of products that we're bringing into the store environment. Apples, we all now know that about 10% of apples on grocery store shelves carry Listeria. We're bringing those products into our store. And we're all, I'm sure, very familiar with the recent issues surrounding ice cream. Risk is everywhere. And there's not a food product in our refrigerators at home or in our display cases at retail that's immune. We have to be very, very, very careful in this business. And that's just the stuff that happens naturally, right? Birds, and pigs, and produce being grown in the dirt. What about bad actors? This issue of fraud. It hit each and every single one of us from multiple directions in some cases when PCA had their issues with salmonella. They were getting positive salmonella reports and doing what? Sweeping them under the rug. Changing COA, certificates of analysis, to make a positive and negative, right? Are we certain that our other suppliers aren't doing the same thing? And if we are, how are we certain? How do we know? How about meat companies testing not to find 0157H7 in their beef products that we're bringing into our stores? How familiar and comfortable are we with those suppliers? Companies making value-added products ready to eat that are ignoring Listeria results in their facilities. Not doing the due diligence to find the root cause of whatever is contaminating their floors, their drains, their tables, their food contact surfaces, and in some cases, their finished products, which we're bringing into our stores. And then, of course, in China, I may or may not be familiar, but they were substituting rat meat for lamb. And you know how they found out? Because it tasted like chicken. But those are the things, right, that we're bringing into our stores. We're bringing into the retail environment. And we have to be very, very careful with whom we associate ourselves, how we monitor them, and then once those products arrive, how we're handling them in the grocery store environment. You know, when we look at the farm to fork continuum, from the growers ultimately to the retail case, think of it as a platoon. Our success is dependent on everybody in that continuum, everybody upstream. And a platoon will only be as fast as its slowest runner. So we have to make certain that the people we do business with, the companies that we associate ourselves with, are leading the food safety cause. And that's how we can best protect our customers. Because once those problems make their way into our stores, they contaminate our environment, they contaminate our deli slicers, they contaminate our food preparation areas, and ultimately, they can contaminate our food. Now, sometimes we might ask, well, yeah, I get this theoretical versus real. I understand we got to kind of maybe look at things through a different lens with a different perspective, Shawn. I get that, but how real is the risk, right? Is that really happening out there? Well, some studies suggest that yes, it is real. And it is something that's ultimately, in one form or another, impacting all of us. Penn State did a study recently to determine, okay, how prevalent is Listeria monocytogenes? That's the bacteria that will kill people, 15% of whom become infected will die. How prevalent is Listeria monocytogenes in the retail deli environment? So they went out and they took 4,500 samples from 30 stores across 3 states. Here's what we found. 4.5% of food contact surfaces, so that's a slicer, that's a cutting board. Surfaces that come in direct contact with food were positive for LM. Again, the strain of bacteria that will kill people. 14.2% of non-food contact surfaces were positive. Floors, drains, walls. Still, though, in the deli environment. And bacteria is really good at moving, right? Getting from one place to another, whether it's on the bottom of shoes, employees' clothing, Somebody drops a pen on the floor and they pick it up and put it on the counter, right? And it only takes, Listeria is a little different. We need higher levels before people will get sick. But if we're dealing with salmonella, or we mentioned E. coli 0157H7 before, or even non-0157 S-Tex, 10 cells to cause illness. Only 10 cells. And I can put 250,000 on the head of a paperclip. Once those microorganisms make their way into the deli environment, they can spread very quickly and cause illness very easily. Bottom line, about 10% of all samples are positive for LM. We need to be aware of this, and we need to be doing things in response, taking steps to make sure that we're proactively hunting down the problem, searching for it, and eliminating it. Because if this persists in our environment, that 10% turns into 15, turns into 30, turns into 50. Microorganisms want to survive as well. It's our job not to give them the opportunity. So why do we care? At the end of the day, why do we care? Well, first off, it's really expensive if we have issues with food safety. It impacts our brand. It impacts our business. It can hurt our industry. And especially when we're getting on the news and we're seeing that our food products are being recalled, or there's been an outbreak associated with our deli. It can be tremendously expensive. And then, of course, right, the lawyers get involved. And when lawyers get involved, the costs increase even more. Companies suing one another because one company sent the other company bad product. Companies trying to recover their losses, right? If I had to recall your products, I have my own brand damage, maybe lost profits, those commercial types of damages. And what about the people who got sick? E. coli 0157H7, if ingested, can lead to acute renal failure, and sometimes cause so much damage to the kidneys that even if the person recovers, they may need 2 or 3 kidney transplants every 15 years over the course of the rest of their life, followed by lifetime dialysis. And that, as one might imagine, can become very expensive. But that's just one case out of 30 or 40 or 50 in a large-scale outbreak. Phil talked about Google a little bit earlier, right? How people can, any one of us, can get online and learn about salmonella or E. coli or Listeria or Campylobacter or Clostridium perfringens or others. We can also find lawyers. I recently did a search on Google. I was curious. We've all heard of, sort of the typical slip and fall lawyer, characterization of lawyers. So I did a Google search for slip and fall lawyer, and I got about 50,000 hits. Then I did a search for food poisoning lawyer, and I got 5 million. It used to be 500,000, now it's 5 million to 1. And who's the one? It's your company. And if something goes bad, all of those lawyers are going to be crawling over each other to do what? No pun intended, to get a piece of the pie. Lawyers have become very, very, very successful in bringing lawsuits against food companies, in part because the awareness is so high. But let's throw the lawyers, off the side of the ship, right? Let's set them aside, and let's set the money aside, and let's set the dollars and cents aside. We also care because we're human beings, because we care about one another. We care about each other, our families, our friends, our neighbors, our community, our customers, and nobody wants to get anybody sick. And that's what should matter most. And that should drive our decisions when it comes to food safety. Doing the right thing for the right reason, not because it costs money. Now, taking this whole concept out of the theoretical, food safety out of the theoretical and putting it into the real, I think it's important to talk a little bit about how these illnesses happen and how we can see them. Phil noted back a number of years ago we didn't hear about foodborne illness outbreaks. Well, that's because at that point in time, early to mid-1990s, there was no system in place through which we could see outbreaks occurring as they were happening. You could have a food product out there getting somebody sick, getting lots of people sick. And let's assume we had a case patient in New York, one in Texas, another one in California. And those individuals went to the hospital because they were very, very sick, and they all cultured positive for E. coli 0157H7. And those hospitalizations were pretty intense. As a matter of fact, the person in New York died, unfortunately. But the people in California and Texas, well, they recovered eventually and went on with their lives. And let's say there were 100 people nationwide that were getting sick. Nobody knew about it. The doctors weren't talking to one another. There was no way of knowing that that was happening. Well, in 1993 and rolling into 1994, when Jack in the Box hit out on the West Coast, we suddenly had a very large outbreak occurring in a relatively limited geographical area. 600 people were associated with that outbreak. 4 kids died. And a lot of those people were going to the same hospitals. And some of them were being treated by the same doctors. And they said, aha, this outbreak is happening. Oh my goodness, what's causing it? And working with state and local health department investigators, we were able to determine that the one thing everybody had in common, bootstrap epidemiology, was undercooked hamburgers served at Jack in the Box. Aha, we solved it. But all of a sudden, suddenly questions were being asked. On the Hill in Washington and other places. What if this is happening throughout the country? How can we, A, see it, and B, if it is happening, how can we stop it? So we moved to a system of mandatory reporting. So now we're living in a world where, same scenario, case patient in New York, Texas, and California go to the doctor, they test positive. Those healthcare providers are required now to inform the state. And they send the isolates up to the state, the isolates that are cultured from each case patient. And those isolates, the bug that made the person sick, are tested to find the DNA strain of that bug. Same technology that FBI uses to determine whether you and I are related or it's my blood at the crime scene. And once those DNA signatures from the bugs that's getting people sick are uploaded, CDC groups them. And CDC is watching over the country like an air traffic controller would be watching over the skies and saying, aha, we have an emerging outbreak. There's all these people throughout the country who are getting sick by what? The same bug which originated from the same original source. And that is what enables us today to solve foodborne illness outbreaks. System of PulseNet, PFG, and MLVA. And that's why we're solving outbreaks. And that's why we're seeing them in the news. And this system is getting very, very, very good. Each year, more and more robust, and our capabilities are increasing. But as a result of this system, we know a lot of people are getting sick. And every year in the US, there's an estimated 48 million illnesses, 128,000 or so hospitalizations, and 3,000 people will die. Set aside the rules, set aside the regulations, set aside the laws, and in our minds, the financial impact of an outbreak or even a single illness. That's why we care. Because we want to make sure that that never happens to anybody. And that's why our job is so incredibly important, and it is real. I have multiple death cases on my desk as we speak. And it happens far more often than you would think. Many documented cases and outbreaks caused by cross-contamination between raw meats and ready-to-eat foods. We all heard about the Listeria issue that we talked about earlier. Cheese products being associated with Listeria outbreaks. And yes, it can happen at the processing level, but it can also happen in the back of our stores. And once our customers take those products home and are exposed to those contaminants, they can get very, very, very sick. 48 million every year will become sick. An estimated 3,000 will die. And again, it's critical that we do our job. And what is that job? What is it that we can do? Well, for starters, we ought to know our suppliers. Get out there and visit them. Get to know them. Encourage your food safety folks, right? To get out and know who you're doing business with. How many people in this room would buy a used car from a used car dealer over the phone? Not a single person. Why? Because it would be stupid. You want to look at the salesman in his or her eye. Find out what type of person that is. You want to look at the car. See if what you think you're buying is really what you're buying. And if we wouldn't do it for a used car, why in the world would we do it for food? So we got to know our suppliers. Relying on an audit ain't good enough. We also have to know our existing capabilities. How robust is our training in our companies? How good are our programs? Do we have food safety programs that are going to get the job done and make sure that we're reducing our risk and exposure to the greatest extent possible? What are our weaknesses? Are we operating in the past, or are we leaning forward in the food safety foxhole? Being aggressive when it comes to food safety, identifying our risk and then getting rid of it. We got to know our employees. We got to treat them right. We have to train them right. What are their weaknesses? How good a job are they doing on a daily basis to make sure that our customers are not getting sick? Fortunately, the organization has wonderful resources to help us control Listeria in the retail environment. Safe Food Matters, focus on Listeria. And it's something each and every single one of us should focus on as well. When we go back to our organizations, spread the word. Tell your quality and food safety folks that these resources are out there and they exist. Basics about Listeria, guides for cleaning deli slicers, different things we can do in the retail environment to make sure that bacteria isn't being spread. These are videos that we can share with our employees, we can use to train them, to educate them, to make them aware of the risks and the different things that they can do to make sure that they're not enhancing a problem, that they're eliminating it. Deals with hand washing, personal hygiene, keeping the back of the store clean, keeping our food safe, of course, and cooking, holding, and chilling to the extent we're preparing products. Dairy case food safety, all sorts of resources exist online. Again, I encourage each and every one of you to rely upon those. There's also some studies that are available that talk about the statistics, some of the numbers that we talked about, and the different things, right, that we can do, again, in our stores to make sure that we are containing that problem. We also have to embrace new technologies. A company named Puridyne recently came out with some PCO technology that's very, very effective. The unit can be hung on the wall and it actually sterilizes the air and food contact surfaces. Same technology NASA uses to scrub the environment in spacecraft. You get multiple log reductions on bacteria in the deli environment. Also kills spoilage organisms, so if it's in your display cases, you can increase shelf life and reduce shrinkage. Company is Puridyne. We have to embrace technology. We have to look for new solutions. Those are things we can do. What must we do? What's probably the most single critically important thing we can and should and must do? It's this. None of those other things will happen. Nothing will ever change unless we develop, we implement, and we maintain a robust food safety culture within our organization. I call these the 3 C's of food safety culture: compassion, commitment, and communication. We cannot have a robust food safety culture without the first C, which is compassion. If we're not compassionate about food safety, it's never going to happen. And what do I mean when I say be compassionate? It's that video we just saw. We have to want to do food safety for the right reason because we don't want that to ever happen. But just being compassionate about something isn't going to get us anywhere. It's not going to solve the problem. We have to commit to do something with that compassion, to put the resources behind it, to make the changes that are needed, to embrace new programs, new training, and new technology. And once we've committed, we need to communicate our compassion and our commitment throughout the organization. So when our management and our employees hear about why food safety is important, and they hear and see and feel our compassion, they too will be compassionate. They too will become committed, and they too will communicate. They'll echo what we say, and we will develop a robust food safety culture. And once that's in place, yeah, guess what? That's when we start saving lives. And we start preventing illnesses we'll never hear about because they didn't happen. A parting thought. How many people know what this is a picture of? It's the top deck of a cruise ship. As a matter of fact, it's the Disney Wonder. And I show this picture because oftentimes when I speak to large groups like this, my colleagues in the industry, sometimes some of you will say, Shawn, that's great. But you know what? We're a world-class processor, or we're a world-class retail chain. We're just like that cruise ship, the Disney Wonder. We have the best facilities, the cleanest operations, some of the best food safety scientists that money can buy. There is nothing more high class or better than what we currently are and what we're currently doing. We're not like that old fishing boat you talked about in the beginning of your presentation from Deadliest Catch, old diesel boat, kind of leaning to one side, probably ready to sink anyways. This is us. And we don't have to worry about those things. We don't have to worry about putting our customers in the hospital or even perhaps, God forbid, killing them. And I say this in response. No matter how big, no matter how good, no matter how sophisticated we think we might be, it is never, ever good enough. Each and every single one of us, each and every day, no matter how big or great, are surrounded by risk. And it's real. And it can happen without warning. And as you leave here today, I want to remind you about your awesome responsibility. We are responsible for the health of a nation. We are ultimately responsible for each of our customers. We cannot become complacent ever. We cannot relent ever. And when we look at that slide and we see each of those portholes, remember, each one of those portholes is a customer. And it's your job to keep them safe. And if you can do that, I can stand on this stage in front of you, in front of the government, in front of the consuming public, in front of the media, and say I'm proudly helping the hardworking people like each and every single one of you who are feeding our families. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.